We put the all-new Grainfather G40 to the test during our Chimay brew day with local homebrewer Jim. Chimay is a Trappist beer originating from a monastery in Belgium. There are 4 main types of Chimay. For this brew, we recreated Chimay Blue. A huge thank you to Grainfather for sending us over a unit in advance to play with. Before we started brewing, Jim took time to upload the Chimay recipe into the free Grainfather app. He then connected the G40 to his phone so that he could control the brew remotely. When you turn the G40 on, it will ask you if you are controlling the brew day manually or through your phone. During brew day, it will give you step-by-step directions and alerts as to what step of the process you're currently on and what's coming up next. The G40 uses 240 volt power and can make up to an 11-gallon batch of beer. First, we set the mash plate into the bottom of the G40. This is a huge improvement from the G30 because the rolled edge mash plate no longer requires a silicone gasket to be placed along the outer edge. Next, we added water. We needed to add 6.87 gallons of water for the mash, which we conveniently measured using the integrated sight glass that includes measurements in both gallons and liters. The G40's larger width compared to the G30 helps it heat the water faster. Water makes up a large portion of beer, so to emulate a Chimay, we used reverse osmosis water that we added minerals back into to mimic a Belgian water profile. This included Epsom salt, calcium chloride, calcium carbonate, lactic acid, and baking soda. You can find out what makes up your water by sending it to get tested, or if you have city water, you can sometimes find reports online or by calling your local water management company. Next, it was time to mill the grain. Our grain bill today is 15 pounds Pilsner, 1 pound Belgian Cara Munich, half a pound of Belgian aromatic, and 0.35 pounds of Belgian chocolate malt. Then it's time to mash in, starting at a temperature of 149 degrees for 30 minutes, 156 degrees for 30 minutes, and 161 degrees for 20 minutes. We mash out at 168 degrees for 10 minutes. When the G40 alerted us that the mash was finished, it was time to lift the grain basket up and sparge. Dan used the handle to pull the grain basket up, but if you had a really heavy grain bill, you can also use a winch. Once lifted, we sparged with 2.17 gallons of water heated to 168 degrees. We tested our gravities to see where we were at, then it was time for the 90-minute boil. We had 3 hop additions for today's boil: 0.65 ounces of Magnum at the start of the boil, 0.45 ounces of Hallertau Mittelfrau with 60 minutes remaining in the boil, and another 0.25 ounces with 15 minutes remaining in the boil. We're also adding Whirlflock tablets with 15 minutes remaining in the boil. Because our target ABV is fairly high, we're adding yeast nutrient to help keep that fermentation going strong. The yeast nutrient is added within 5 minutes remaining in the boil. We are also adding candy sugar. In an effort to not scorch the bottom of our Grainfather G40, we measured out the candy sugar into a container and slowly added small amounts of the boiling wort to melt it before we added it into the G40. The candy sugar is added within 5 minutes remaining in the boil. Cooling our brew down quickly is essential in preventing harmful bacterial growth that could spoil our efforts. But luckily the G40 comes with a counterflow chiller that makes this step really fast and easy. If you've never used a counterflow chiller before, it's pretty simple. A counterflow chiller differs from an immersion chiller because the wort runs through the inside of the device alongside coils that contain cool water, instead of immersing the chiller in the wort. A counterflow chiller like this one cools the wort down very quickly, and it really only took about 10 minutes to go from high temps down to a cool enough temperature to pitch our yeast. Our yeast today is WLP 500, a monastery ale yeast with an alcohol tolerance of 10 to 15%. We used a wireless Bluetooth tilt hydrometer to monitor the real-time temperature and specific gravity of our brew. Our target specific gravity was 1.085, and when all was said and done, we hit 1.086, making this beer 9.58%. One nice thing about the G40 is that there really isn't a need to use a hop filter, making cleanup a lot easier. Now this beer will sit to ferment at a temperature of 68 degrees Fahrenheit. It will sit in primary fermentation for 7 days before being racked into a secondary fermenter, with additional yeast being added 3 days before bottling. For all of the equipment and the recipe that we used today, check out the links in the description. Thanks for joining in our brew day. We had a lot of fun. A big thanks to Jim and Lisa for letting us brew with them on the brand new Grainfather G40.